This is Pete Moore on Halo Talks NYC. I am bringing back to the podcast a friend of the square, Eric Malzone, podcast king, and a mentor to me in what he's doing with Future Fitness, Podcast Collective, and making sure people hear what they need to know and then execute upon that. So, Eric, welcome back to your second Halo Talks.
Yeah, Pete, it's an absolute pleasure, man. I love chatting with you. I thoroughly enjoy our conversations, and I've been looking this all week. I mean, it's Friday, and what a treat! This is like one of my favorite things to do on Friday.
Awesome. So you and I are not short on words. So let's let's elaborate on things that you've brought onto the podcast that you think are game changers, and what maybe some of the anecdotal comments have come back to you and said, "Hey, man, I heard this on the podcast and changed the way I think," or "I just implemented that." So let's start with that, and we'll go from there.
Yeah, sure. So, give people background. I've been doing this podcast thing for quite some time now. It's been 7, going on 8 years between all of my, outlets or channels. I've done about over 800 interviews now. I don't know. It's like I just stopped counting at some point, right? But it's been a really, really interesting journey, of course. I started the Future Fitness because I just sold my gyms. I didn't know what I was going to do next. And the whole goal, and I'm getting to the point here, is my whole goal was like, selfishly, I wanted to skate to where the puck was going. You're wearing a New York Rangers hat on. I know you get that hockey analogy, Pete. And that was for me. I'm like, well, if I'm doing this, I might as well do it for other people and start recording it, and just took it from there. So that's the very short story of it. But I think, as far as the impactful things that come, and I guess there's a couple different ways you can gauge impact on the podcast, right? Obviously, there's audience numbers, LinkedIn impressions, social media impressions, stuff like that. That's a good indicator. That's the hard metrics of reach. But there's also, as you probably would agree, there's the impact that you hear from people, right? Like direct feedback about a specific episode or a specific topic. And, the stuff that tends to get the bigger audience reach is going to be things that, I guess, since you and I both do really B2B media, is the big names, right? Like when I had, Tom Dowd from F45 to talk about the new direction of that franchise that he had just come on. There's, things like that, where it's like a pivotal moment. You're almost breaking a story. You're getting insights that people haven't seen. They're dying to hear. I'm really excited. I have the new CEO of CrossFit coming on soon, and that's something I've been trying to get for a long time. So I think, there's those pivotal transitions of big brands and names, and people want to understand what's their strategy, where are they going. Some people are cheering for them. Some people aren't, right? Not everyone's cheering for F45. Not everyone's cheering for Exponential, right? But some people are. So I think that's part of it. The other stuff, I think, the stuff that we deliver on, and when you came on my podcast recently, Pete, we talked about directly, like the stuff that's really freaking changing the industry and how do people stay ahead, the GLP-1, the longevity, the women's health and fitness, right? I think that's the type of stuff that's really interesting to people. I recently had Eric DeRock on. I think you've had him on as well, and talked about his GLP-1 manual. They've created 130 plus pages on how to work with GLP-1, 30 years of industry experience. So that type of stuff, I think, makes a really hard impact for those who actually absorb it and utilize it. So I think that's kind of the big ones. And then there's just my favorites. There's people I just love talking to, which I'm sure you have too. I love talking to Kelly Starrett, right? I love talking to Brandon Cullen from Metabolic. These are just friends of mine that I enjoy jamming with, and that's just for fun. I don't really give a shit if people like it or not. I have a good time. So I think that's, kind of overarching. I'm happy to dig into whatever cavern you want to go into there.
As we look at some of our statistics on our podcast, sometimes I feel like this is an awesome podcast. Take 20 to 30 minutes, listen to it. It's going to change the way you think about your company, your employees, what you're doing inside and outside the club. What inning are we in, if we want to take a baseball analogy, to the health club and the Halo sector embracing podcasts as a channel?
Yeah. Wow. And I agree, man. Like the one you came on my podcast recently I've listened to that a few times, and dude, there's so much actionable value in there. And it's like, why isn't this at 5,000 downloads, 10,000 downloads, right? It's infuriating sometimes because you're working so hard, it's good. Man, I would say we're probably in the third or fourth inning right now. I think it's very early.
Do you think there might be a way to take the podcast and basically turn them into like continuing education credits or something that would like latch on to the fact that Dave and I, we'll do a Halo Academy and sometimes we'll have to add people, like in the last 24 hours. I'm like, who doesn't want to learn something that is going to be deliver them like a whole new set of knowledge? And it's not going to take that much time. You're not going to get graded on it, at the end. It's a basically pass fail. You show up, you pass. Why are we behind on education? And could the podcast be a way of saying like, this is the education, just listen?
Yeah. Well, I don't think this is going to be a shock to anybody who listens to your show, but I think the education model within our industry needs an overhaul. It has for quite some time. I've done some short series with podcasts. In fact, I'm even writing a course for NASM right now on how to launch a podcast and how to run a podcast. So that's way more work than I thought it'd be. Holy shit. It's a lot of work. But, I think it's a great way to do it. I think here's the thing is like, when we look at the audience numbers for podcasts within our industry, a small percentage of people listen to podcasts, but that's growing, right? Of people who listen to podcasts, like if you listen to podcasts, you're probably going to listen to 7, right? So you're going to listen to multiple ones. So the best way to grow podcast audiences to date is really getting on your other people's podcasts, like we're doing right now. We get on each other's podcasts. Then people are like, oh, I listen to Halo. I'm going to like Future of Fitness too, or vice versa, right? So I think that's, as we kind of build, but we're also in a very niche industry. Like our industry is not super big compared to like aerospace or like, some of these global industries that are humongous. So I think we have to give ourselves a little bit of grace into the audience numbers that will grow. But yes, I think people seek out education and knowledge through podcasting because it's like spoon feeding the information to them. It's easy. They can do it while they're hiking or walking or washing the dishes or whatever they want to do. It's a secondary thing that they can do. And everyone's looking to save time, right? Or multitask nowadays. So I think it's a great way to do education. And one of the things I'm pitching with NASM is like, hey, I actually want to do this whole course. And this is probably going to kick myself in the ass for saying this, but I want to do it all in audio format. They can have that, but I also want them to digest it audibly because then it gives them the essence of what a podcast could be. So, I've done some short series, Pete, and I would love to collaborate with you on something like this. Like, very specific, very surgical, like, hey, this is a 5-part series on specifically like onboarding for gyms and health clubs, right? I did that. eGym sponsored that and I did that. It was good. Didn't blow you out of the water with numbers, but I think that type of stuff, when you can get really granular, I think is super valuable for people if you hit the right target.
Yeah, something that we'll come back to you on is we're setting up these 90-minute drills. And it's basically going to be, here's how you do a non-disclosure agreement. Here's how you do a letter of intent. Here's diligence, and make it,
nice.
Skill set based on how a deal gets done and processed, and be able to like take people through that. And basically, it's going to be a Monday night, and every once a month or something, we'll do another topic and just go deep, and then we're done. I want to have people pay more for the replay than to be there live, is what I think we're going to do. One question I had for you on the podcast collective side, explain to people how that works and what are you doing on behalf of the other podcast hosts that have them, want to align with you?
Yeah. Thanks for asking that. So, obviously, I've been doing this podcast thing for a little while. I've noticed a couple things, right? Is that overall, I just think the whole experience could be better. And the reason we started the podcast collective is we want to do B2B media, PR, through the lens of business development, right? So our clients that we work with, like we know our job, right? Our job is business development, but we just happen to use podcasts and media to do it. Now, that's nothing shocking. It's nothing shockingly new in the marketplace. What I think is what we're doing differently is that I've seen so many times podcasters, content creators don't get paid a lot for the most part, especially in B2B media. It's hard to make $1 and monetize your content. But who does make the money? And this is going to sound ironic. The PR agencies, right? The ones who are placing, right? Because what happens, Pete, if I pay you to do $500 to do this episode, people are like, well, I don't trust Pete, right? He's just being pay to play and like blah, 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 whatever. I look at it as like, well, good for Pete if he is, because then he's actually monetizing his content because it's a lot of damn work. So what we're trying to do as we develop, first thing we had to do is build our main client base of doing the PR, doing the media placements, doing the strategic introductions, and helping them grow their business, which is going really well. Secondarily, now my next project is, which you guys got an email this week about, is, okay, now I want to start building value and building a community of podcasters so that we can start leveraging that collective strength, right? So that may be like through monetization opportunities. Like there's a new sponsor that's interested in you guys. I talked to David about it this week, right? I want to pass that on to the podcast community, asking nothing in return, and start building that. And also we can leverage things like, maybe discounts on Riverside, even if it's a 25% discount, right? Hey, that helps, right? And people don't know Riverside's the platform that we're recording on right now. So things like that, creating more value for the community versus just using them as a resource to make money on the PR side. I want to start passing value through. So in essence, I think that's one of the bigger things, one of the bigger differences we have. And we're also very surgical. We primarily just do podcasts and media, just in fitness, health, and wellness. And that's our specialty. And that's what we're really going to focus on.
Are there areas that you don't want to go towards? As an example, somebody said, "Hey, can you come on and talk about, what happened with Planet Fitness and in the locker room?" And that caused some boycotts. That caused some questions about like what's the right business thing to do. I want to stay away from that because I don't think I'm an expert in that, and I don't want to become one. Secondly, if there's a company for sale, I'm a banker. There's like unwritten rules that you don't talk about somebody's process. That's a confidential process, even if it's been leaked to the market. That's off limits. So are there certain things that you're like, hey, maybe that's an interesting, conversation or debate, but, I don't know if I want to go there. How do you think about that? Or does that not concern you?
It does. I mean, it's always in the back of my head. I mean, it's just like, I kind of look at it this way. If I'm not going to talk about it at a dinner table, I'm probably not going to want to talk about it on my podcast. And I think there's certain things that just don't need to be touched. Hey, I mean, I'll do it, right? Like I'll go there, I'll give my honest opinion, but my honest opinion is generally, I want to stay away from it anyway. So yeah, there are certain topics like I will touch, but I won't want to necessarily go there. It's not good. It's not productive, right? Some of these things are just not productive conversations. So to answer your question kind of opaquely on that one, that's like yes and no. As far as like, any kind of other things like I'm not regulated like you are in M&A and banking, man. I mean, I have one of the things I love about the podcast medium, I absolutely love, is that I can really talk about whatever the hell I want to talk about. And it's my show. No one's going to come crashing down on me because I said something explicit or I said touch on something. I mean, there's going to be repercussions for things I say anyway. If I say something stupid or something that may offend one of my clients or potential clients, then I got to live with that. But there's nothing like from a regulatory standpoint or anything that I have to really concern myself with. But I totally understand where you're coming from. You have to be fairly careful on where you put your feet.
Yeah, and also it's just going to piss people off that are potential buyers or sellers in the market if I go to town on some of those things. What have you found out about the attention span? And what's the sweet spot? You and I spoke for about an hour, which I think was great. Mm-hmm. We typically are going 20 to 30 minutes, and maybe this is something that other future podcasters are going to have to think about. Obviously there's guys that do marathons. I don't think that's akin to, our audience, but how do you feel about the length of time? And is that something you've got any statistics on or have a gut feel, or people come up to me and say, hey, I did a 20-minute run and I just listened to a podcast. Thanks for keeping it short.
Yeah. It's a really interesting question. It's funny. Just 2 weeks ago, I was doing research on this for that course I'm writing. And I have so much data flowing in my head right now. I can't pull it back for this moment. But I could say this is that the formatting is highly like specified for the type of content, who the audience is, and what you're trying to get across. I think, for stuff like if you're doing, there's a lot of people who are maybe B2B or doing like, hey, 10 to 15 minute things on a specific topic, like, I don't know, what was the ones we said today, like onboarding or, legal forms, right? Or insurance, choosing a type of insurance for your gym, whatever it may be, like those little things that you're spoon feeding a specific topic can be really interesting. I think personally, the long form interview is probably one of the more popular things you can do. And by long, I mean, 45 minutes and over. Because I think it allows a topic to unfold naturally. I mean, sometimes like in the first 5 to 10 minutes, maybe people you and I have, rapport already, but maybe they're a little nervous or you don't have that rapport yet. And then you kind of settle into the conversation. That's where the really good stuff starts. And I think that's truly what sets the podcast form out from all the rest is you can do it for duration period of time. You really get to know people. You really get to unpack specific topics and go deep and granular. So I think there's a lot of different things. And obviously there's different generations, right? Younger people tend to like, more quicker hits. I mean, so they say, although the research doesn't really back that up from what I've seen. So to answer your question, it really just, the only answer I can give is it depends on what you're trying to do. I mean, I do 45 to 50 minutes simply because the people that I interview tend to do their calendars in an hour block, right? So if I ask them for an hour and 20, hour and a half, they're gonna be like, whoa, but an hour seems to be very accessible to people. So there's a real functional reason that I do it. The executives of all these companies aren't going to give me 90 minutes or 2 hours unless I have a very compelling reason to do it.
Gotcha. So when you came up with the name, The Future of Fitness, obviously you're talking about the present and you're looking around the corner at the same time. Yeah. So as you kind of curate your guests, are you kind of using that as like, look, I don't want to actually tell you what's going on now. I want you to tell you what's going to happen in 6 to 12 months and give you like a window into maybe being a first mover for once.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's exactly it. Like I said, the hockey analogy really is like how I do everything. I just want to help the industry skate to where the puck is going. So the worst thing we can do is skate to where the puck is right now, or even worse, where it was a minute ago. Right. And that happens, as you know, people tend to stay in a rut within their industry. So emerging technologies, new thought leaders, like all the stuff that you and I talked about in a recent podcast, the longevity, the GLP-1s, like this is stuff that people really, it's coming out so fast. Like the updates on all the different applications for GLP-1, Pete. I'm sure it's much more than fat loss, right? It's so much more things that it seems to be effective with. Like, okay, we need to keep our industry updated, and then how do we do it? Talking to the Eric DeRox about his manual, and all the different technologies and all that stuff is really important for the industry, and that's just tends to be where I get really excited anyway. So yeah, that's the whole premise of it. Is I just want to help people understand what's coming around the corner and be prepared as they can for it.
I mean, I'd love to see this playbook that's been put together. You and I are both sports fanatics. So a playbook basically says, look, implement this and run this offense. I don't know what other playbooks there are for, obviously people put an operations manual together and then they put it in a drawer and typically nobody refers back to it. There's playbooks and sales scripts, but I think sometimes I go into a club and, the sales script has been, recreated, and personalized. It's not really what I wanted you to say. Right. So I wonder how we can maybe get more compliance with actually running a playbook, and then taking the time out and saying, what was good about this? What wasn't? I was interviewing somebody the other day. They were talking about Planet Fitness, and they said they had 8 stops on the floor on the tour, and it was deliberate. Each stop had a comment to it and pointing. And that was it. It was only 8 stops on that tour. I feel like a lot of clubs still have not kind of gone into the attention to detail and say, this is exactly what I want you to do. And it's almost like you're an actor or an actress. Like just play the part and here's the lines. I feel like a lot of freewheeling still goes on for no reason. So maybe we should bring back more authentic playbooks. They should be like you can pull them off the shelf, and then have a podcast to listen to while you're going through it. That might help.
Yeah, I would agree. I think that would be a great compliment for a podcast. One of the things that, and this is to your point, but also slightly off it, is like, even like what I'm creating right now for the NASM course on launching and maintaining your podcast. My fear is this: by the time that comes out, that artificial intelligence, the next level, ChatGPT 5.0 will come out, all this stuff will be antiquated, right? Like the speed at which things are changing. And I hate to say this publicly, but I'm like, gosh, like, I don't even know, like, what's course creation going to be in 6 to 9 months? Like, what can do it better than it can do it better than I can, because it can do it in my voice and it can access all the information all over the world even faster. So it's like, we create these playbooks, and I don't know if people are paying attention to this or not, Pete, but it's like it's happening right now. It's really fast and it's really scary and exciting at the same time. But like, you could go right now, Pete, you could say ChatGPT, you could say, hey, you're Pete Moore. You're telling ChatGPT that it's going to be Pete Moore, right? And then all of the information about you, your background, your education, what you do, like all these things, and now write in my voice. And then you could say, I want a playbook for onboarding new clients, right? For one specific health club. And you know what? It's going to come out with something that's pretty freaking good. And then you can, change it over time. So it's like all of these playbooks and manuals and all that stuff. I'm just concerned that it's all going to change really fast, and we're not even going to need them anymore, right? Like, we're not going to be the ones writing them anyway. So I don't know if that sounds too futurist, or too alarmist, but that's my honest gut feeling is that's what's happening right now.
Well, it's going to be interesting. We sell businesses based on multiples of cash flow, and as you think about, you've got a $60,000 employee, doing some kind of marketing collateral or, copywriting and doing your newsletter, maybe that's 60,000 times 5 or 6 or 7 times. I mean, that's $350,000 of enterprise value multiplied by how many people could potentially be uprooted by the technology that's out there. And I think if somebody proofs it, then you're good to go. I mean, I still think people are thinking, okay, I'm just going to put it in here and just going to pop it up on the web. I do not recommend, that, but it's getting pretty close to, being able to effectuate exactly what you want to say in the tone you want to say it. So the question for you is like, what's a job description for somebody that's basically like taking everything from AI and humanizing it, or just, who does that right now? What's the new job title for that? Yeah. Is there one?
I mean, the only thing I could think of was like AI prompter, something like that, like an AI technician. I don't even know what the title is, but prompting is really big. In fact, like we're my partner at the Podcast Collective, Shannon, and I are coming up with a very specific course, which we're going to do free or workshop specifically for podcasters. It's going to be free. It's going to be 20, 30 minutes, and it's going to be just specifically prompting ChatGPT. That's it. Like, because most people don't know how to do it.
Tell us when to.
You guys will be there for sure.
We'll get it out there.
And that's it. Like, I'm starting to like, that could be just a job, like just AI applications. Like, that's your role. And, your job is to stay every day, every week on what the new update is, what's going on, how do we leverage it? I mean, that sounds like for someone with ADD and a tech, fascination, like that sounds like a wonderful job, right? Like literally every day you're just scouring and like working with AI and like trying to figure out like, hey, what are the applications for business and whatever else you're into for how you can do it, because it's evolving so quickly. So I don't know, man. It's crazy.
Is there anyone in this industry that you say is ahead of the game on implementing AI or ChatGPT or groups that you said?
I think AI at an enterprise level is Omri Yafi at V Labs and what they're doing. They are showing some. I can't say any of their numbers here, but it's bananas, the growth and what they're doing for companies and huge companies in healthcare and pharma, not just fitness, but that's really big. So I think on the enterprise side, I would say them. On like the smaller business applications using, the tools existing like ChatGPT, I don't know anybody, man. I don't, because I've been looking. So I don't know. Maybe that'll be me in 3 months. I don't know. But that's what we're focusing on.
You should come to the FinTech Summit that Al Nashavani
in Vegas
puts on. Yes, that's. We should survey people there and say how much of this AI is actually you using it or you're just talking about it. Because I think there's a lot of talk right now, and maybe there's an intimidation. So let's get that course out there for 30 minutes.
Yeah,
get smart on it. So give us a little insight into what are the next couple episodes that are coming out. What are you most excited about on the future of fitness?
Yeah, I think, like I mentioned, just a minute ago, is I'm going to be interviewing. So it's going to be sometime before August 10th. I'm going to be releasing a interview with Don Fall, the new CEO of CrossFit, which I come from a CrossFit background. And that was my first 9 years in this industry, was owning CrossFit gyms and coaching and competing at a very horrible level. But like that was my world. So I'm really excited to get him on and talk about that to new direction and talk about the future of CrossFit. So that's one. And then also I do a quarterly deep dive with Alex Alamanestaniano and Juliette Stelleret. So we're going to be recording that next week, and we go into this kind of stuff that you love. Like Alex will go over all the quarterly reports for public companies. We'll see what that means. We'll pick one or two relevant topics that are very topical for the industry. So those are always super fun. But other than that, I think all of them get me excited in some way. Otherwise, I wouldn't do them. So yeah, and then work with Athletech Unscripted and Eddie on his platform. We have really massive interviews that are going to be released there. A lot of big CEOs, a lot of executives. So I would urge people to check that series out too. We had Jim Rowley from Crunch on recently. So a lot of really, really cool people and smart people.
Well, there's more investment that's coming into our industry than ever before. For the last 3 years, before about 6 months ago, I was doing mostly outbound, investor calls, and now they're calling us saying like, "Hey, you have something in the boutique studio space?" I'm like, "Really? You're back? Thanks for coming back to the industry. How about med spas? You got any med spas I could invest in?" And the multiples are double digit multiples to get in on some of these concepts. So there's definitely Ozempic. What is it? Wegovy. I keep seeing those ads. Wegovy. Those are only going to support the industry. Well, we thought maybe that pill that would come out would crush it. I think the health club operator and the bricks and mortar player in a community actually has a big advantage. And they just need to make sure that they get this messaging to their members and be the authority on as many things that you can say you are, which is another reason to listen to some podcasts. So, hey, man, I love what you're doing. Happy to collaborate anytime. If you haven't listened to Future of Fitness, highly recommend that. Podcast Collective. I'm going to start to dig into some more episodes there. And, just keep doing great things, because you affect one or two people on a podcast, even though the numbers might not be where we want them to be. I hear little tidbits that make me excited. So,
yeah. Well, Pete, it's a pleasure, man. And once again, I love what you and David are doing. And it's quite an honor to be on your show. So
awesome.
Thank
Likewise.
you, man.